You were never meant to blend in. If you're reading this, it's because something inside you refused to stay silent. You've felt it, the quiet knowing that you see what others pretend not to, the unease in rooms where truth is avoided, the weight of words left unsaid because the world wasn't ready to hear them. You've walked through storms alone, not because you were weak, but because you were built to carry what others couldn't even acknowledge. And still, you're here, not broken, not erased, rising. This isn't just a story, it's a reckoning. Your presence alone disrupts illusions. Your truth doesn't need permission. And what they tried to bury in silence is already moving like a fault line beneath the surface, waiting. You are not here by chance. You are the disruption. You are the fire under the surface. And it's time they hear what you were never allowed to say. Let's begin. A stage was assembled with precision, not for performance, but for distortion. Within its spotlight stood a figure that bore your shape, but none of your depth. This impersonation, crafted by voices unwilling to listen, acted out a role scripted without your input. The moment clarity tried to enter the scene, curtains were drawn and the house lights dimmed. No dialogue allowed, only echoes of a single, rehearsed narrative. Even your breath, when it dared to disrupt the silence, was dismissed as noise in a theater where only one script could be performed. They chose consistency over honesty, applause over truth. What lives inside you, the unfiltered pulse of your lived moments, remains untouched by the hands that tried to reshape it. Authenticity doesn't dissolve under suppression. It simmers, and when unbound, it doesn't whisper but roars. Behind the stillness, a hand pulls every string. A mind that noticed your presence, felt its weight, and moved swiftly to dull the glow before others could gather near. Their technique is stitched into second-hand conversations, conclusions drawn from smoke, not fire. Their blueprint is fear, a fear not of what you did, but what your voice could undo. Illusions crumble under exposure. Deception needs scaffolding and silence. So, they painted shadows on your face and called it daylight. Not because you earned such mischaracterization, but because their own reflection was unbearable. Their image stood taller beside your diminished silhouette. Every word you prepared was intercepted by whisper campaigns. Claims of deception pinned to your name long before you even opened your mouth. They built traps from half-truths and lined them with warnings, so that even your most measured defense echoed like guilt. What they feared most was not confrontation. It was your calm articulation, your steady illumination. Maintaining their version became a daily ritual, a sacred act of containment. But nothing built on distortion holds forever. What they buried in silence now waits, louder than ever, to rise. You are not here by accident. If you feel the pull, the knowing deep inside that you are chosen, this is your moment. Click the super thank you button and give $50 or more to unlock deeper insights, exclusive content, and a path that aligns with your divine purpose. This isn't just a contribution, it's a declaration, a step toward who you were meant to be. Answer the call, walk with us, and step fully into your destiny. Your journey begins now. Beneath the surface of everyday exchanges, meanings became warped in transmission. What began as ordinary speech arrived tainted, molded into insinuations that bore little resemblance to the original tone. Familiarity soured under the slow drip of reinterpretation, each interaction gradually tilted towards suspicion. By the time words reached their destination, they had shed their original skin and emerged as something altogether alien, tools fashioned to cast doubt and unease. Around this distortion, a silent machinery turned. Trust fractured along invisible seams as once reliable relationships were fed, altered fragments of a larger puzzle. The pieces given to each individual differed just enough to prevent assembly. A cautious choreography kept questions unasked, discrepancies unnoticed. No alarms were raised because each person believed they understood the full picture, while in truth, they each held only a manipulated shard. What followed was a campaign of erasure in plain sight. Achievements were minimized with casual dismissal, failures spotlighted with exaggerated concern. Actions and intentions were painted in tones they never held. The portrait constructed in absence bore only a twisted resemblance to reality, yet somehow it rang true to those who had once stood closest. Memory bent under repetition, doubt rooted in the soil of once solid connection. In this reframed version of history, echoes of genuine moments remained, distorted but still there, lending an illusion of credibility. Offhand remarks returned with jagged edges. Vulnerabilities shared in trust were repackaged as proof of manipulation. Support dissolved not in chaos, but in careful sequence. One bond after another frayed in silence, until what remained was a solitude too deliberate to be mistaken for coincidence. Elsewhere, conversations unfolded in rooms never entered. Verdicts whispered in absence, the rhythm of daily life shifting ever so slightly. Interactions cooled by degrees, glances diverted, words measured, invitations rescinded without mention. These subtle omissions became a chorus of absence, the unspoken message louder than any confrontation. Once disconnected from the collective, the silence surrounding grew deafening. Stories told without challenge hardened into belief. Voices left unheard could not offer balance. The scattered fragments of truth, documented and stored, remained untouched, not because they lacked clarity, but because no one cared to look. What once stood as clarity now rests beneath the surface, overlooked and unmoved. Authenticity, built over years in 1,000 quiet ways, fades into the background as others cling tightly to a fiction more convenient than truth. No matter how consistent the track record, it vanishes behind the curtain of a story that feels more dramatic, more immediate, more useful. Long-held bonds are fractured not by conflict, but by the absence of inquiry. When the cost of asking is the collapse of illusion, silence becomes the preferred currency. Despite facts lying in plain sight, discrepancies in timelines, contradictions in claims, realities supported by those who were actually there, the impulse to investigate vanishes under the weight of willful belief. The scaffolding would fall in seconds if even one person tugged at its base, but no hand reaches out. Even so, momentum builds below the surface, not in spectacle, but in a slow, unstoppable shift. What is buried cannot decay if it was never meant to be forgotten. Recognition simmers in the background, even as suppression persists. Filters attempt to obscure, yet something unmistakable breaks through, an unexplainable resonance that keeps pulling attention back to what matters, even if no one admits it aloud. There are those who did not fold, not because of proof, but because something unshakable throbbed beneath the noise. Not passive observers, but those who felt the tremor beneath the facade and stood rooted. No allegiance to the illusion, no loyalty to the mask, only a quiet certainty that the falsehood will expire and that endurance itself is a form of rebellion. Away from the noise, out of public view, connections deepen. Teachings once dismissed emerge again, reshaped and relevant. Knowledge once hidden behind red tape and ridicule returns, traded not in spectacle, but in whispers. Preparation begins in quiet corners, not for retaliation, but for reclamation. A new kind of readiness takes form, untouched by spectacle. What lingers, heavier than silence, is the unyielding distortion etched into perception. A mirrored self walks in others' minds, a version that never existed. No outcry reaches them, no correction penetrates. The dissonance remains lodged deep. The ache of knowing your name carries meanings you never gave it. A truth-denied entry can only wait, and it does, unchanged, undeterred, and growing louder in stillness. Thoughts circle like trapped satellites, endlessly revolving around unspoken lines and unsent messages. Silent rehearsals consume the hours meant for rest, offering imagined confrontations where truth slices through delusion and demands recognition. These internal simulations offer a fleeting sense of control, but the outside world remains unmoved, unchanged. Each mental loop leaves behind a residue of fatigue, a weariness born from decoding every glance, every phrase, as if each moment were a cipher hiding danger. Authentic response becomes impossible in an atmosphere where openness feels like exposure. The body, constantly braced for invisible impact, absorbs the weight of vigilance. It doesn't wait for words to wound. It reacts in advance. Breathing shallows, muscles lock, digestion falters. The cost of guarding against misinterpretation isn't just emotional, it's cellular. A quiet war rages beneath the skin, a defense mounted against distortion that never sleeps. Doubt creeps in not through confrontation, but through quiet erosion, a slow unraveling of certainty. Was that really what happened? Could they be right? Did I misstep without knowing? This is how the story turns inward, when a crafted fiction begins to echo inside, carving cracks into one's own foundation. The greatest victory of manipulation lies not in external belief, but in internal uncertainty. The mind, wired for simplicity, clings to tidy conclusions. Complexity feels like chaos, and in that discomfort, the false becomes preferable to the uncertain. The first story heard anchors itself deep, and all future revelations are weighed against it, usually unfavorably. Accuracy becomes secondary to emotional cohesion. In this terrain, misinformation doesn't just survive, it thrives. Contradiction is not just an intellectual challenge, it's physical. Discomfort tightens its grip, demanding resolution, not through truth, but through retreat. It's easier to reject new input than to dismantle a previously accepted idea. The image of another becomes a refuge from the tension of reconsideration. Comfort, not clarity, dictates belief. When relationships are the lens, facts blur. A trusted voice casts a long shadow, and to question the story it tells feels like betrayal. The ties that bind often blind. Emotional investments obscure the obvious. Challenging the accepted version threatens more than a narrative. It threatens social stability. So silence wins again. Most opt for the smoother road, one that doesn't ask for reflection or rigor. They drift with the dominant current, even when it leads away from fairness. The idea of fairness itself becomes expendable in the name of convenience. When the majority affirms a distortion, resistance becomes rare. Consensus creates the illusion of truth, and the few who question it become anomalies, quietly erased. Illusions gain momentum, not through their truth, but through the crowd's willingness to echo them. As repetition masquerades as reliability, the lie solidifies. When enough voices align with the deception, it no longer needs justification. Its survival is ensured by volume alone. Doubt becomes dangerous. To question the narrative is to stand apart, and most would rather blend into the chorus than confront dissonance. You are not here by accident. If you feel the pull, the knowing deep inside that you are chosen, this is your moment. Click the super thank you button and give $50 or more to unlock deeper insights, exclusive content, and a path that aligns with your divine purpose. This isn't just a contribution, it's a declaration, a step toward who you were meant to be. Answer the call, walk with us, and step fully into your destiny. Your journey begins now. Yet deception is rarely airtight. Sooner or later, details fray. A memory that doesn't quite match the telling. A claim that unravels under the weight of its own impossibility. A prediction that never comes true. The story starts to vibrate with static, a dissonance that even loyalty struggles to ignore. Deceit is maintenance heavy. The more complex the fabrication, the more moving parts must be kept in sync. Eventually, an oversight occurs. One listener stumbles into a contradiction too obvious to smooth over. A raised eyebrow becomes a question, and that question becomes a wedge. Others follow, tentatively at first, then more boldly. Fabric begins to split where it was stretched too thin. Experience becomes the wrecking ball. A first-hand encounter shatters second-hand belief. Someone sees with their own eyes a moment that doesn't match what they've been told. Perception collides with expectation, and the internal conflict demands resolution. What was once accepted now strains under scrutiny. With one lie unmasked, the architect's entire pattern begins to show. The techniques, once subtle, stand out like red flags. Their voice, once persuasive, now grates with obvious control. People who once admired them start to spot the seams, recognizing the repetition in how others were treated the same way. The shift is rarely dramatic. It begins in silence. A private realization sparked by a jarring moment, a blatant distortion exposed, a single verifiable twist too twisted to explain away, and then recognition. The moment sneaks in rather than explodes, but it turns everything on its head. Awareness crashes into the mind like light breaking into a darkened room. There's no returning to blindness once the pattern is seen. Facial expressions change. Shock flickers across their features as assumptions dissolve. The body responds before the mouth can, stunned by the sheer scale of what was missed. With context restored, everything looks different. Conversations once filtered now appear in full color. The omitted parts reappear. Documentation withheld now surfaces. First-hand testimony once ignored suddenly resonates. The missing pieces snap into place, and the whole image finally aligns. Initial reactions skew defensive. The guilt surfaces as frustration, not with the manipulator, but with the one they ignored. The urge to blame outward masks their shame for having played a role in the harm. Acceptance comes slowly, hindered by ego and discomfort. Eventually, the walls fall. Regret emerges in fractured apologies, never quite equal to what was lost. Words fumble through the cracks, gestures of restoration, hesitant and uneven. But change begins. The voices that once echoed judgment now carry a different timbre. No longer condemnation, something softer, more uncertain. And in that shift, restoration begins. Recognition arrives like a delayed echo, clearer now after so much distortion. What was always there becomes visible at last, and those who once turned away now stare, bewildered by what they failed to grasp. Their prior certainty dissolves into self-questioning, as clarity reshapes what once passed for understanding. The truth, having taken the long route, makes its entrance through the least expected passage. Support rises from an unlikely corner. The figure assumed to be indifferent, quiet, disengaged, steps forward with a clarity no one else dared summon. Their distance, once mistaken for apathy, reveals itself as quiet observation. Their words, untouched by bias or agenda, finally land where others failed to make impact. And in that shift, a voice long ignored begins to resonate. Falsehood, once protected by repetition and silence, falters when exposed to what cannot be reshaped. Data with dates, records impossible to bend, eyes that once turned away now forced to confront what stands plainly before them. What had been dismissed as exaggeration or paranoia is now reviewed with grim acknowledgement. The illusion doesn't wither. It collapses in a single breath, undone by a truth too sharp to deny. The artificial structure that propped up deception can't withstand sustained contact with reality. As the first brick is questioned, the wall disassembles rapidly. Distance turns to approach. Caution becomes openness. Misgivings melt into an urge to reconnect, tentative but genuine. The entire dynamic reshapes itself as the false scaffolding crumbles. Energy changes before words do. Doubt is replaced by resolve. The internal debate concludes, favor tilting decisively toward the one who stood alone. Misjudgments once cloaked in confidence are now faced with quiet remorse. A truth long held in solitude begins to echo outward, no longer dismissed, no longer denied. Validation lands with the weight of too many missed chances. A truth acknowledged too late to prevent what it might have, its arrival laced with ache. Those who remained still during the storm now seek redemption in the calm. Their preference for quiet over justice cost more than they were willing to admit, and now they offer recognition in pieces, hoping it's enough. Inaction is not neutral. The absence of confrontation did not preserve peace. It allowed harm to deepen unchecked. Silence signaled acceptance. Discomfort outweighed integrity. The unspoken became endorsement, and those who kept their hands clean bear the same stain as those who orchestrated the damage. The norms they clung to became tools of harm. The steady comfort of staying uninvolved was chosen over truth. One challenge could have changed direction. One refusal to comply might have unraveled the scheme. But no disruption came, and so the isolation strategy succeeded, because those who could have intervened refused to move. Courage was always available. They simply opted for convenience. They saw the warning signs. They heard the dismissals. They noticed the shifts. The puzzle was solvable, but they left it incomplete, unwilling to confront the possibility that they were complicit in its assembly. Now, they speak in remorseful tones, hoping belated words might cover the gap. But acknowledgement after destruction cannot undo what was done. Their apologies, though sincere, serve their own healing more than the one who endured the wound. Truth is finally seen, but the landscape it returns to is forever changed. What was once whole now carries fractures that can't be polished away. Certain connections, though outwardly restored, no longer fit the same. The spaces once shared effortlessly now require negotiation. Time lost remains untouched, beyond retrieval. Truth may have surfaced, but not without cost. Its arrival marked by what it could not mend. Self-preservation now shapes the perimeter, and caution becomes the guardrail. Experience hard-earned now becomes the compass. Access to your space is earned, not assumed. Those who never asked for your version of events find themselves gently distanced. Those who fueled the damage are met with the proportional chill of consequence. Silence, too, is weighed, not for what it didn't say, but for when it chose to say nothing. Forgiveness transforms into a process, not a gesture. There are those whose actions reflect understanding, whose apologies hold weight. Others reveal themselves incapable of the growth required for reconnection. The gate doesn't swing open on sentiment. It responds to consistent alignment with truth. Where there was once openness without discernment, there now stands a gatekeeper. Integrity proved itself not through noise, but through restraint. Where others clung to illusion through tactics and fabrication, a quiet refusal to mirror their methods made the contrast undeniable. No games played, no truths bent, no cheap victories. The distinction is no longer subtle, it is glaring. For those who now look more closely, healing begins not with their desire for repair, but with your own sense of safety. Restoration is not a performance for their relief, but a process rooted in your reality. Time is not owed to those who failed you. It is reclaimed for what you need. Their unease in facing accountability is no reason to shorten your journey. Order reasserts itself without force. The unraveling of false victories is not dramatic. It is inevitable. What is not built on alignment must eventually dissolve. There is no need to chase exposure when time itself delivers the reckoning. Patience, once mistaken for weakness, proves to be endurance in its most potent form. Those who twisted perception discovered the futility of their effort. The effort to contain truth becomes a losing battle over time. It cannot be locked away without consequence. To carry deception is to shoulder an endless weight. Eventually, they tire. Eventually, they falter. This restoration means more than personal peace. It is an echo of something larger. A broken pattern corrected, a space rebalanced. Not just for the sake of one, but in service of a principle. That truth, however delayed, remains the final shape into which all distortion must collapse. Reality preserved what memory tried to forget. What others denied remained imprinted in the architecture of existence itself. Beyond perception, beyond opinion. The essence of truth was never dependent on their belief. It lived outside of their reach. While people looked away, the integrity of your experience held steady in places untouched by distortion. That alignment carried you, steady and unwavering, when all else collapsed. You are not here by accident. If you feel the pull, the knowing deep inside that you are chosen, this is your moment. Click the super thank you button and give $50 or more to unlock deeper insights, exclusive content, and a path that aligns with your divine purpose. This isn't just a contribution, it's a declaration, a step toward who you were meant to be. Answer the call, walk with us, and step fully into your destiny. Your journey begins now. Revelation came not by accident, but by precision. The sequence of events once mistaken as delay was in fact orchestration. Each moment of postponement allowed the pattern to deepen, contradictions to surface, and context to solidify. What once felt like silence was preparation. When truth arrived, it arrived fully formed, undeniable in its completeness. The voice once swallowed now resonates like a bell struck cleanly, clear, controlled, irrefutable. The very attempts to suppress it tempered it. What was silenced did not vanish. It matured. When it returned, it bore a resonance sharpened by restraint and forged in clarity. What had been subdued now reverberates with the power of precision. No longer bound to defense, energy takes new shape. The need to correct misconceptions is gone. What was used to shield now builds. What once protected now expands. Space opens up, not only to heal, but to imagine again. Possibility becomes the new directive. Survival has been replaced by emergence. Their effort to diminish became the very engine of expansion. Opposition created resistance, and resistance produced strength. Endurance became a skill. Boundaries became instinct. In solitude, sovereignty emerged. The identity they tried to dismantle evolved into something they can neither reach nor reduce. Understanding carved from hardship now functions as a shield. Through trial came the ability to read intent beneath action, the motive beneath the mask. Manipulation, once confusing, now appears obvious. Illusion no longer disguises itself. This intelligence, born of pain, becomes your protection, precise and unshakable. Validation is no longer currency. What is known doesn't beg to be believed. Truth does not require assembly or approval. Experience stands unchallenged. It cannot be overwritten. What endured attempts at erasure now stands too deeply embedded to be moved. In trying to uproot you, they deepened your roots. Every distortion, every omission, every denial, all recorded in the record no hand can erase. Every unseen moment held within the deeper mechanisms that govern consequence. Time does not forget, and what was taken finds its way back in form or function. The rebalancing may be quiet, but it is absolute. The unveiling occurs not with spectacle, but with certainty. What was long obscured becomes visible with no effort. Reality reasserts itself not through force, but through inevitability. What was buried was never broken, only hidden, and once exposed, cannot return to shadow. Your foundation now stands verified not by argument, but by collapse of the opposing structure.